Happy Thanksgiving, everyone! Today we gather to honor the historic first celebration of harvest shared between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoags 400 years ago. For our 400 Years Ago Today series, we posted each episode on the anniversary date of when they originally occurred. But for this video, that's not possible because no one knows the precise date of the first Thanksgiving. All we know for sure is that the festivities occurred over the course of 3 days, sometime after the harvest between late September and mid-November. The Pilgrims faced many hardships during their first year where they settled at Plymouth, which had escalated to become even more of a trial than their already arduous journey of persecution in England and a tumultuous voyage across the North Atlantic. New England's harsh winters and disease took a heavy toll on the community. Of the original 102 aboard the Mayflower, only 53 remained alive to celebrate this first harvest, including only 4 of the original 20 women. In March, those who survived met the Wampanoag people. The Wampanoags are a confederation of tribes who speak the same Massasoit language as, but were independent from the Samoset, who the Pilgrims had earlier encountered on our last episode at Cape Cod. The first Wampanoag they met was named Samoset, and he shocked the unsuspecting Pilgrims when he boldly walked into the colony alone, asked them for a beer in English, and proceeded to share much about the locals of the area. The most crucial connection Samoset helped make for the Pilgrims was introducing them to the now famous man Tisquantum, who they called Squanto, who explained to them that 6 years before he lived here at Plymouth Harbor, but a filibustering English captain tricked him onto his boat to trade and tried to sell him as a slave in Gibraltar, where he was redeemed by monks who taught him Christianity. Before meeting the Pilgrims, Tisquantum had traveled multiple times to England and to Newfoundland before being appointed as interpreter and natural resource expert on a Plymouth Company contract near his homelands. But when their expedition arrived, they found his village completely abandoned due to death from disease. So they turned to try to partner with other nearby Wampanoags. Their head chief, Massasoit, refused to cooperate, having recently been betrayed by European sailors. He may have even killed the colonists, if not for Tisquantum's pleas. But now, with this new opportunity with the newly arrived Pilgrims, Tisquantum mediated once again, and this time was successful at establishing peaceful trading relations and eventually an alliance between the Wampanoag people and the Pilgrims. Tisquantum and other Wampanoags then helped them understand the land and successfully plant their very first crop in American soil. He taught their tribe's variation of the traditional agricultural method of North America called the Three Sisters. These sisters are corn, beans, and squash, planted in a pattern so that they all interact in a complementary way. The corn forms a pole for the beanstalk to grow on, the beans fertilize the soil for the corn and squash, and the spiky leaves of the squash protects them from pests while shading the soil to retain moisture. They also taught how to fertilize the ground by burying fish alongside the seeds of the Three Sisters. By autumn, thanks to this shared wisdom, they had grown an abundance of food, and so Governor William Bradford called for the feast. They went from malnutrition to wishing their loved ones across the sea could join them to partake. Celebrating a fall harvest with a feast was a common tradition, as it is in most agrarian societies, and probably has been since Neolithic times. Harvest time was also a local traditional time to make diplomatic rounds, so it was not unusual for Wampanoags to join other groups for a feast. Over 90 Wampanoag men, including Massasoit, came to join them, outnumbering the Pilgrims 2-1. The Wampanoag went hunting and brought back 5 deer to contribute to the feast. The Pilgrims also went hunting for waterfowl and possibly wild turkey as well. Other wild foods mentioned being eaten by the Pilgrims were shellfish, garlic, cranberries, walnuts, grapes, and Jerusalem artichokes. They also grew garden vegetables from seeds, which they had brought from England. During those 3 days of celebration, those gathered did more than just feast. Both groups engaged in shooting contests, the Wampanoags with their bows and arrows, the Pilgrims showcasing their matchlock muskets. One wonders which could shoot farther. Both peoples also had similar traditional practices going back centuries, playing a game known to the Pilgrims as pitching the bar, which basically amounted to tossing a length of tree trunk as far as one could. The Wampanoag may have also taken up popular games of the time, including early varieties of soccer or lacrosse using a deerskin ball and play areas up to a mile in length. They often bet on outcomes, which the Pilgrims would not have participated in according to their moral code. Saying a prayer of thanksgiving before and after every meal was commonly practiced by the English. Even though we don't have a record of the words, there would have been a customary prayer of thanksgiving. However, the Pilgrims did not call their harvest celebration Thanksgiving. What they called Thanksgiving at that time was a day of prayer and fasting, which was unrelated to the fall harvest. Regardless, this was a day they had much to be thankful for. The Wampanoags and Pilgrims had recently suffered so much loss, both recently losing half of their people to disease. And yet, now they could share in the relief of a peaceful alliance and an abundance of food for the winter. And for the Pilgrims, they could now see the mission of their pilgrimage to become a city on a hill and a light to the nations finally begin to come to fruition. Today, we remember this feast by recreating something like the first Thanksgiving in our own homes, resting from a year of work, gathering together to play games, eat food, and to give thanks to God for the blessing He has bestowed upon us and our nation, including peace, provision, and friendship between peoples. Let's remember our forefathers in giving thanks on this day, and let's join them on a pilgrimage of our own.